This is July 30th, 2020. My guest is Bruce Macdonald. He's a Canadian who was born in Ottawa, Ontario. He has a journalism degree from Ryerson University in Toronto, Ontario. He's the author of Coureur de Bois, a 2007 book, which was a work of literary fiction, and a recent book, Stardust Ranch, the incredible true story. I have a picture of his cover behind me here. Well, it's missing the top, but this is the cover. And Bruce has worked in Canada, the United States, and Europe as a technical writer, editor, and designer in the fields of software and telecommunications. In 2014, he moved to the province of Limon, Costa Rica, where he's talking to us from now, where he lives on a small farm in the Talamanca Mountains with his wife, Rosemary. So welcome to the show, Bruce.
Thank you, Brian.
This is our first time on, and you said you've been watching me for a few years. Is that right? My video shows?
Yes, I have.
And we're both hosts on Revolution Radio. Why don't you start right off telling people if you have a website, how they can find you and your Revolution Radio show, right? Because we do it at the end of the video. Some people might not stay to the end, so we should do all that at the beginning.
Well, I do a program called Macdonal in the morning from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock in the morning, Monday to Friday, on Revolution Radio Studio A, and that's an internet radio station, and it's the URL is revolution.radio, and I'm a writer, and yes, I've written a couple books in the last year that I would describe as in the alternative space. The first one, they're actually co-writes. So I write the books with the subject of the book. So the first one is by John Edmonds and myself, and that's called Stardust Ranch, The Incredible True Story. And the second one, which is the cover behind you, Brian, is The Light of Darkness, A Warrior's Tale for Our Time.
Ah.
And that was co-written with Robert Wiegand, who is an ex-Navy SEAL and an ex-CIA contractor who decided it was time to tell his life story.
Wow, why don't we start off with your first book? I know we have a lot of common interests, like how aliens work through governments and secret society. I think we're gonna have a great talk on this show. We want to kick off just telling us a bit about that book, your second to the last book.
Okay, so Stardust Ranch, The Incredible True Story is the story of John and Joyce Edmonds. They live in Rainbow Valley, Arizona. They bought a small 10-acre ranch in 1996 and entered into a kind of Amityville horror situation with gray aliens. And it's ongoing. They've been living there 24 years now. John is one of the most experienced people in the world of ufology. You don't see him at the conferences a lot, and he's never really told his story before. John doesn't really fit in with the mainstream UFO narrative, which, in my opinion, Brian, I'm not sure whether we agree on this or not, but in my opinion, it is a highly controlled narrative. A lot of lies, a lot of misdirection.
Yeah, we agree that it's controlled. Even some of the big names like Linda Moulton Howe, I can see how she's controlled, or at least self-controlled. And Richard Dolan I admire a lot. I think he's self-controlled, but it's definitely controlled there. I agree.
Yeah. So what Stardust Ranch is mainly about is portals. So portals are a big part of the history of this planet. Once you understand that portals exist and that they're real, everything changes. So we've been living under the myth of evolution, and Charles Darwin, since about 1848, I believe, is when he wrote The Origin of the Species. And of course, evolution is a part of what goes on this planet because species do change and adapt to environment. But it's certainly not the whole story. Most of the things on this planet that are here, especially at the level sentience, which would be the human being, the hominid, we're all brought here, Brian. This is one of the things that I now believe. Now,
Yeah,
this
I
isn't
agree with
discussed.
that. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I've talked
Is
to
it?
here in Vancouver a PhD in biogenetics, and she was telling me like 30 years ago she believed that, and her colleagues believed that, but professionally they wouldn't dare say it. That they're not just humans,
Yeah.
but everything she said was brought here. Most things were brought here, she said.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of stuff was brought here, and portals open and close. They're not open all the time. Very often, when you see conflict in the world, war, there's a few reasons for it. Number one is resource domination. So the powers that be are taking over a country that has a resource that they want, and they were unable to get a government in there that would cooperate with them. But another big reason that we see war is for some of these ancient sites with portals. So this is, I believe, a big part of what's going on in the Middle East and securing the Greater Israel Project.
If I could interject, I thought the Iraq War in 2003 was about that, portals, and I thought that was part of it as well. What do you think?
Portals are a part of the Iraq War, in my opinion, Brian. One of the major things about the Iraq War was they wanted to confiscate a lot of the Babylonian artifacts. They want that narrative to disappear from the planet. Because when people study it, it stimulates the imagination and creativity in such a way that you can have a lot more theories about what's going on this planet.
Yeah, I would agree. The elites, I would say, well, my thesis is international Jewish power is actually working with aliens, for aliens, but they want to keep the masses down. They don't want us to discover portals or the genetic engineering discovered in the cuneiform tablets, or
Yes.
anti-gravity, anything like that. They just want to keep us down. They want to keep us away from these wonderful discoveries that could really improve humanity. What do you think?
Well, yeah, the only addendum I would add to that from my perspective is I might not say, the Jewish people in totality. I think 90% of them are completely brainwashed in the synagogues, but within the intellectual, historical, and cultural framework of Judaica, specifically the Talmud and the Kabbalah, and the Kabbalah is begun by King Solomon in 930 BC. He is also the king that lost the United Kingdom of Israel when he got into this reptilian black magic. Then you have half of them went into Babylonian captivity and half of them went into Assyrian captivity. And that's where the two Talmuds start, the Babylonian Talmud and the Assyrian Talmud. And this is when Judaica just really goes wrong. Before that, it was actually guided by very benign
I'll give you hour after hour. We'll do part 1, part 2, part 3. This is great. I wish we met years ago, Bruce. This is very cool.
Well, things happen for a reason. Now's the time.
Yeah, maybe it's timing as well. Because for me, the timing is more in the last 6 months. I'm focusing. I'm not sure if you saw on my website, brianrood.ca, at the home button, I have my 4 top priorities for all of humanity. Number 1 is like disclosure of the truth of UFOs.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever interviewed Paul Hellyer?
Well, I met him in person. We've been emailing since like about 2017. And he wrote to me, well, I don't want to be in your show. I don't want to talk about races or individuals except for David Rockefeller, because he openly admits he wanted a world government. So he said, I emailed him just about 2 months ago, emailed back, well, I'm kind of busy, don't want to be on your show now, I'm kind of a hot potato, but I know him, and so right now he's not coming on my show. But I met him in person at the University of British Columbia. I met him, chatted with him. He gave a talk here in 2017 on bank reform. It was a bank reform meeting.
Yep.
Now for Labermont, Weber was there. I know him and other people.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
Oh, we just had a technical break here, but I'm back and I changed my picture behind me. This picture is actually Vancouver City Hall, where I've been many times before. This is a UFO photo that was taken, I think, in 1937 by a man who was there with his brother. They attested they saw this UFO. There's a description of it on UFOBC.ca. I think they described it as bluish. So some critics have said, oh, that's just some kind of a watermark on the film or on the paper. But no, the witnesses said that's what they saw, and that's the picture. This is quite astonishing. This is my city hall. This was like back in 1937. This is 2020. So, and actually, it is actually a corridor. It's on Canby Street. There's supposedly a corridor of UFOs going up and down that street for many, many decades. So anyways, Bruce, we're back. We're carrying on with your book here. I think we cut out in mid-sentence or something.
Yeah. So in 2012, I was introduced by a mutual friend to a gentleman named John Edmonds, who was having a phenomenal experience at a ranch in Arizona, which has become known as Stardust Ranch. It's quite infamous. And the mutual friend knew me to be a writer. I had a journalism degree and I had published literary fiction. And he couldn't get anybody interested, I guess, in this book, or he didn't know any writers other than me. So he came to me and he said, Bruce, I want you to meet this fellow. I want you to talk to him, and I want you to consider writing a story. I said, well, what's it about? And he said, it's about an alien-infested ranch in Arizona. And you know, Brian, I really wasn't a big UFO guy. I mean, I know as much as anybody now, probably more than most of the so-called experts, because once I get into something, I get into something. I'm a little OCD that way. But at this time in 2012, I really didn't know anything. I mean, I knew ETs. I knew what most people's grandmothers would know about ETs. And so I did agree. I did agree as a favor to my friend to take a call with this fellow. And I remember he seemed extremely sane, extremely balanced. And what he was telling me was going on at that ranch was like beyond comprehension. And this was before this is about 8 years ago. That whole area is broken open now. They're doing an entire series on the Skinwalker Ranch, which is just north of Stardust Ranch. And just, so it goes Skinwalker in Utah, Bradshaw in Arizona, and then Stardust in Arizona. And they're all on the same line of longitude. They come down north to south in a straight line.
Oh, that must mean something. Oh.
Yeah, there's something about the ley lines and how this plays into, I guess, what you would call the dimensional fields that separate what we would call the physical and what I would call, in classic occult language, the astral. Some people call it the fourth dimension. So I was hearing things that I just couldn't believe, like aliens appearing in groups of threes out of nowhere, just popping out of thin air, in the living room, in the ranch, outside, animal mutilations, just about everything you've heard in the ET world, So, covering everything, the Linda Moulton Howe stuff about the animal mutilations and all of this sort of stuff. Now, remember, at this time, I didn't know anything about this stuff. I really hadn't read anything. I didn't know anything about the animal mutilations. I didn't know anything about Eisenhower and the long-nosed grays. I didn't know anything to do with the ET world. But I really liked John Edmonds, and I felt really bad for him. So I said, okay, I'll write this book for you. Well, we started to work on it. We worked on it about 4 or 5 months. He's in Arizona, and at this time I'm in Mississauga, the west end of Toronto. This is before I moved to Costa Rica. And Brian, I don't know what was going on, but I started to, I don't know, get really freaked out by the whole book. And a lot of weird stuff started happening with my electronics. I started to have weird dreams.
You mean just from reading a book? Just reading a book?
No,
working on the book.
Working on the book for about 4 months with John.
Wow, I want to work on this book.
I had a profound sense that I was being watched all the time. Anyways, I reached a point where I freaked out and I said, look, I don't want to work on this book anymore. And John was very upset. His wife was very upset, and I dropped the book. And this was, I guess, an early, there were some mitigating factors. Okay. So as part of the story, and this is really what John Edmonds is known for in the ET world. He's killed a number of gray aliens with a samurai sword. So I know I
samurai
laugh
sword?
when I, yeah,
Wow. Couldn't he use
yeah,
a
you laugh.
particle beam weapon or something? He's got to use a samurai sword.
Well, you have to take them out so that they don't dematerialize, because they materialize and dematerialize. To take them out completely, you have to cut the head off. And so he killed one, and he ended up in contact with a doctor named Levengood. And Levengood was a botanist. He had a PhD. He lived in Michigan, I believe. Was it Dearborn, Michigan? Yeah. And he had deviated from normative science and become interested about 7, 8 years earlier in crop circles. So he was somewhat known in the UFO world. And when he heard that there was an Arizona rancher in possession of alien tissue, he was quite interested. So the tissue was sent to Dr. Levengood, and the test results were done, and they were getting ready to put a press package together and go public and everything. And then very quickly, Dr. Levengood died. It was some kind of accident. And then
Do you
his
think it was
wife,
an accident, or was he suicided? What do you think?
I think he was killed. I mean, his wife died 3 days later,
So did she
right?
die in
And
a completely separate illness or accident?
she slipped on a banana peel.
So you think they're both killed?
I think a lot of people in the past have been killed in the ET world, Brian.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I think the ET thing is the biggest secret in the world. And
Yes, I agree. The biggest secret in the world is UFOs and aliens, and just the secrecy itself is astonishing. You know, aside from the phenomenon, just the secrecy itself in 200 countries is astonishing.
yeah, that they can keep it all secret. And I think the reason they keep it secret is once you pull on that string, you pull on some other stuff, and they're not ready to tell the world about that stuff. You know, it's okay to talk about flying saucers and stuff like this. From my opinion, from my perspective, we'll say, not my opinion, but from my perspective, Brian, there's life everywhere. There's life in the antimatter. There's life in ether. There's life inside the sun. There's life inside the earth. There's life around us, slightly out of phase with the sound and light spectrum we live in, according to our auditory and visual capabilities. It's not just a question of life coming from other planets and galaxies. It's life, sentient life here I'm talking about. I'm not talking about earthworms or dogs and cats. There's my dog now.
We're
Must be
talking about
somebody
your
on the
dog.
road.
That's what we're talking about, your dog.
Yeah. I mean, there's sentient life everywhere. This is what I've learned since I sort of got into this field, right? Yeah, there's life everywhere.
Well, I would agree with you, even about the sun. The Buddha actually stated that the sun's disk is the divine palace of a deva, which is an angel, so a higher dimension being. There you go. So
Yeah,
I agree with your thesis so far. You're doing fine.
yeah. Oh, as a small caveat, you know, I lived in Taiwan from '92 to '94, and I briefly studied with a Taoist master and an esoteric Buddhist master, and was able to get some very beneficial, you know, direct one-on-one teaching or counsel from those guys. And yeah, I
Good.
find that culture absolutely fascinating. And I find Taoism, which is the indigenous Chinese religion, to be just about the most fascinating. I don't even want to call it a religion. The most fascinating body of knowledge on the planet to me is Taoism.
Yeah, I got great respect for it. Actually, in 1990, I was a Taoist just before I became a Buddhist the next year. So I'm still into Taoism.
Ah, great. Did you ever read Opening the Dragon Gate, the biography of the present living Grand Master of the Dragon sect of Taoism,
No,
published
no,
by Shambhala Press. It's quite
no.
some amazing story. You know, he was basically taken from his parents when he was 8 years old and raised by three Taoist wizards. And it just, he's alive today. Like he lives in China today. Um, but it's fascinating what those people know and understand about human consciousness and
Yeah,
how consciousness fits into the whole life pattern.
yeah.
From the one thing comes 10,000 things, and from each of the 10,000 things comes 10,000 more things. They're basically explaining fractals. Do you know that the I Ching is the world's first binary language? It's 64-bit. There's 64 possible hexagrams in the I Ching,
I
and
didn't know
the
that.
simple,
Wow.
yeah,
It's one of the oldest
this
things, right? What century was the I Ching, or don't they know?
I think it's about 800 BC, but it's a simple binary of three sticks, either vertical or horizontal, and you put them in groupings of four. And if you do the math, there's 64 possible variations of this. It's a Chinese form of divination. And I find it very interesting that, you know, in the first phase of computing that we're in now, is you know, we look at the computing world as it started out, it's a binary system that operates on zeros and ones, and for the most part, it's a 64-bit system right now. So this is why the Chinese are rising. It's their time. We're, you know, it's almost like the stuff they've studied and the systems they've studied lend themselves better to the world right now. I think we're moving into a time where cooperation is more needed amongst people, and maybe the radical individuality of the West has seen its day. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but
Well, I don't know. Keep talking. I'm listening. Well, yeah, I think we have a problem with radical individualism. You know, like I'm a National Socialist. I think that the community above the individual.
so, you know, I quit John's book, and then okay, so then I 15. And then in late 2014, in the fall of 2014, I came over to Costa Rica and I started to look for land. And I ended up buying land here in the southern part of Costa Rica. And when my son finished high school, he came up here and we did this big project. We built these 4 earth bag homes here, these 4 buildings to sleep about 12 people. They're really comfortable and really earth here. And I was in my house and I had neighbors coming over with their cell phones and they were taking pictures of orbs above my house. And I said, gee, that's weird. And it made me think about the book I quit with John Edmonds, and I called him up in like June of 2019. And I said,
You mean
did you ever get that book finished?
2014 or 2019?
2019, after I'd been living up on this mountain for
Oh,
about
wow.
four
Okay.
years.
Yeah.
So my up here on the mountain, my neighbors started photographing orbs over my house. And like I said, this made me think about the book with John Edmonds. So I called him up and I said, are you ready to write a book? Or did you ever get your book written? He said, no. I mean, several writers had tried to do it and they all quit like me. There's just kind of a creepy vibe around it. I don't know how to explain it. And I'm apparently not the only one who feels that way. So um, John said, let's do this. And so we set out to finish the book. And we finished it in about 6 months. And it came out December 31st, 2019 on New Year's Day. We put it up on Amazon.
Oh, you mean you saved it for my 60th birthday? Thank you, Bruce.
Your birthday is the 31st?
Yeah, my 60th birthday, December 31st, 2019. How do I look?
Wow, okay. You look pretty good for born in 1960. Pretty good. Or 1959.
Yeah, 59, yeah.
Yeah,
Last
okay.
day of the 50s. That's enough about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think about me?
You should sell cars, man.
It's a conversation stopper. So what's the
Yeah.
second connection? You got to tell us something about this book. So you decided to get back into the book and finish it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so I finished the book and we published it, and it was a very, very it was a weird experience. I'll tell you that right now. It was a very weird experience writing this book. Um, like I said, we had this thing going on in the house where like I don't know what was going on, but there was this really weird smell. It was a little bit like blood and copper. It's very organic but not organic. It was
Yeah,
like a
I
fusion
I
of,
gotta stop you right there. I was just thinking of copper. Like, it's amazing. Like when I was just to share my experience, when I was 19, I was doing some kind of channel writing. I wrote 200,000 words in the summer of 1979, and I had the smell of burnt copper. Like for days when I was writing, like there was a smell of ink. Like I had ink pen. There's so much ink, maybe a bit of ink smell, but I had the smell of burnt copper. And I met someone from the Edgar Cayce Institute also said psychics had the smell of burnt copper. So when you said, just before you said the word copper, I was thinking about copper. It gave me a little shiver. So carry on. Like, what is it about copper?
that
I
won't
don't know, man.
that won't be the last time you get a shiver in this interview, I promise.
Woo!
So I also had a lot of like very negative energy in the house. Um, everything was reacting to it. I have an American Staffordshire Terrier, big strong dog. That's kind of my security up here. And I have about 7 cats. We don't fix them, so they just, they have a natural cycle up here in the rainforest. Some live, some die. Um,
Sure.
and and my wife as well. There was a very kind of like negative presence in the first like 3 weeks of working on Stardust Ranch. And then one Saturday morning, my wife and I woke up, Brian, and there was a ball of white light at the ceiling of the bedroom. My wife took a picture of it. Um,
Wow.
yeah, I have it here on my phone. I'll send it to you after this interview. You can see it. And
Please, yeah.
it hung out for about 10 minutes.
Well, one thing
And
I could
then
mention though
it
with
was so,
I could mention with Zoom, it is possible for you to share a screen if you want to pull something up while you're talking. That's quite possible. We can do that with Zoom if you want to.
um, no, I mean, you can edit it in if you want
Yeah,
to.
yeah, okay,
It's
sure,
quite,
sure.
it's, it's, it's quite a picture. I mean, it really, it's, I don't know what happened. It was like illuminated water is how I would put it. So it came in, it hung in the bedroom there for about 10 minutes, and it totally cleaned the house out, and I was able to finish the book with John Edmonds.
Like 10 minutes is
So
such a long time. Holy smoke. So what do you mean it totally cleaned the house out?
like that whole negative vibration left.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, so it was quite something. It was really quite an extraordinary experience. And yeah. So we finished the book, and I mean, I'll tell you a little bit about the story. So, I mean, John's lived out there for 24 years now. He put his life savings into the ranch. He can't really recoup the money, so he can't sell it really. He was I guess you'd call it, what is the official title? Like a psychiatric social worker in Arizona.
Are you saying you
Um,
cannot sell it because it's so spooky, nobody wants to buy it?
yeah, and the people who do, I mean, Big Robert Bigelow was interested in it for a while, of Bigelow Aerospace, right? But so that's Stardust Ranch and the incredible true story. But a lot of weird stuff has happened out there, and anyways, this
What
spun off
state
into
is
a
it
lot.
in? To tell us what state is it in?
Arizona.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
hmm Arizona. Um, Buckeye, Arizona, to be specific. So it's right by the Estrella Mountains. Now, Arizona has this whole thing going on. I'm editing a book by another Arizona writer now. I'm going to publish this, but I'm not working on it. It's his book. It's called Petroglyphs in the Sky, and there's something really interesting about Arizona. And some people believe it was a Phoenician outpost, but there's a lot of activity there. There's generally a lot, in my experience, Brian. There's generally a lot of paranormal activity in deserts. I don't know why, but
Yeah.
it just seems. Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, beginning with, I guess, Jerusalem, right? The original paranormal site with all of those sacrifices to Moloch and everything. Um, so, I mean, that book really got me started looking into this topic, and the research I did writing the book, right? Because anything that came up in the telling of John's story, I sort of looked into it quite thoroughly, and it just, the whole thing absolutely fascinated me, right? Did you ever look into, we did a chapter on abductions. Now, John didn't want to talk about it because it's very personal for him and his wife, and a lot of abductees feel this way, right?
I just did an interview on Friday with Jeff, a local abductee, and I know several right here in Vancouver. Yeah, it's all very personal. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth to get them to talk, you know? Yeah.
There are abductions happening in Vancouver.
Oh, absolutely. One fellow, Gordon Harper, he gave me permission to use his name. He was on the #1 highway here in Vancouver in Burnaby, Gilgardy Way. Um, he was picked up in his car with his young daughter, young girl. And the car was later dropped down on the #1 highway by the East First exit. And he managed to get off the exit, drive his car and turn right. This happened about 20 years ago. This is a guy I meet regularly. I've known him for about a year. And he said, yeah, I'll do a video sometime. Yeah, I'll do a video sometime. Yeah. But he hasn't done it yet. I know I can name 10 abductees I know personally in the city of Vancouver.
So why do you think we're not talking about this very much?
Well, I think we should. Like Jeff, we've done 2 thorough PowerPoint presentations over 2 hours each, and the aliens have
No, but
actually told him to talk
that's
about
not
it.
what I mean. That's not what I mean. What I mean, Brian, is why aren't we talking about this as a society at a formal level? Why aren't we having research done about this at Harvard and Yale and Princeton and the University of Toronto and the University of Victoria?
Yeah, I agree.
Why is this not being taken seriously? I mean,
Yeah.
in what school of psychiatry do they suggest a mental fantasy that is detail by detail the same amongst thousands of people living on different continents? Is that some kind of mental virus you catch, like the COVID virus, where it puts the same experience in your consciousness? Like,
Yeah,
how
your
does that
point is,
happen?
yeah, it's worth studying, even as totally mental psychiatric phenomena. That's worth studying. The same, like 15 points of the experience. Like Dr. David Jacobs has a really good YouTube video about 6 minutes long about, say, 15
Yeah,
aspects of abduction experience. You know this, just for the audience's sake.
yeah,
Like the alien gray leans right against the forehead, looks into the eye because that's where the nervous system is. Things like that, known in Australia, South America, Europe, America, all over the
yeah,
world. So yeah, your point is, if it's a psychological aberration, that should be studied in universities.
yeah. Well, what do you think it is? What are your opinions? And before Jacobs, did you read any of John Mack's work?
Yeah, I read some of John Mack's. I think I was into him before he died. He was killed by a drunk driver, supposedly around 2010, was it? Or was it earlier than that? 2004. Yeah, I guess I read his stuff after he died. Well, I'll quote David Jacobs. I got his book here, The Threat. He says, the alien abduction program needs to be kept a secret, and explains why. In my view, since aliens control the governments, they're telling the governments to keep this a secret. And he said, because if the general public knew about it, there's so many women who get pregnant in the first trimester, for example, the aliens come and take the baby. Sometimes they never give it back. The lady thinks she
Right.
has a miscarriage or whatever. She said, you know, if couples knew this, they might just get an abortion, they might interfere. Therefore, it has to be kept secret. He explains this in his book.
So
The
do you,
Threat.
let's just move away from Stardust Ranch. And by the way, I'm marketing a book, so it's called Stardust Ranch: The Incredible True Story.
And where can they
by
get your
Bruce.
book? Is it on Amazon?
Exclusively on Amazon. I find it to be a really good distribution point for literature or for books.
Well, we'll have a link below this video. They can look below this video for the link to your book. Huh?
Sure.
And you
Sure.
want to promote, what about your other books? You want to mention those too?
Well, we'll get to that in a bit. The
Okay.
second one I wrote with a Navy SEAL and an ex-CIA contractor,
Cool.
and he had a lot to say about extraterrestrials running the world as well. It's amazing how this is a theme that just seems to keep coming up in 2020, and it's
That's
amazing
like my
how even
main
5
theme.
years.
My most important theme for my show is aliens running the world. If I've done several videos with Gene Broda and others, so I want you back on for another video after this one, Bruce.
Okay. Let me try and keep my cigar lit here because it's a nice thing to have going when I'm having a conversation.
Sure.
And these cigars are very cheap in Central America. These
Oh.
are Nicaraguan cigars. It's
Huh.
cheaper to smoke cigars in Central America than it is to smoke cigarettes in Canada.
That reminds me when President Kennedy ordered the embargo in Cuba. First, his advisors had to assure him that he got all these Cuban cigars, and he said, "Oh, great! Now I can sign this damn thing." True story.
So you go first, and then I'll come back with what I know. How have you been led to the conclusion that extraterrestrials are running the show now?
Well, I seriously got into ufology around 2006, and Richard Dolan was here in my apartment doing a video. He stayed here in 2014. So by then I formulated a theory, but my theory at that time, I thought, well, is the human power structure, like the Rothschilds asked Richard, are they trying to supplicate the aliens to get goodies from them in power? Richard Dolan told me, I think it's the other way around. I think the aliens are in charge, whether they're reptilian or whatever, and the humans are their agents doing their work. So I was kind of a bit surprised, like, really? So that was June 15th, 2014. So since that time, that was the time. Richard Dolan's been a big influence on me. And today I just bought his executive summary for $33. It was a $69 summary. One day, like, show he did in June. So the theme of the show is his thesis about extraterrestrial relationship with the governments. He said, I haven't discussed this on my shows, my YouTube videos. It's here. And I'm going to have a get together with my friends and watch this. So he's an influence on me. So I think he's kind of a conservative historian. If he says it, that adds some weight because he doesn't make stuff up. You know, he usually goes by documentation. And others have said it too. And it's entirely reasonable and logical. Like I think like Linda Moulton Howe says, for 270 million years, aliens have been here. And Jeff, a local abductee, in his PowerPoint, he was saying he works with a higher level grade, not just a little grade, but like kind of a magistrate grade, like I'm not sure if it's a mantis, and she was saying to that they create the human bodies. So I feel aliens made us, created us. Therefore, it makes sense that they're controlling our governments or they're overseeing us like lords. That is my view.
Yeah, I agree completely. I had to come inside. It started raining there, so I agree completely. I think that okay, so when did the aliens start controlling everything according to your time frame?
Well, Linda Moulton Howe has insiders within the U.S. government and beyond the UFO government who stated there's 270 million years ago, 3 groups of aliens have been vying with each other, you know, not entirely cooperative over planet Earth. But Michael Kremel's research shows that they found anatomically modern human skeletons in Colorado and Illinois and coal deposits that are 300 million years old. So I would push it to 300 million years old. And the Hindus have a human history going back 2 billion years. So I would say it could be 2 billion years of human beings. Of course, I don't know. It's my best guess.
Well, we're in. I was just feeling you out to see if you were going to go with, like, you know, after World War II because of nuclear testing, because a lot of people begin their ET narrative there.
Do you have any more light in your room? Can you turn on more light? Generally, the video, you want to turn on all the lights you got. Oh, it makes a huge difference. The audience say, oh, there he is. Now you can see your handsome face.
Thanks.
Well.
So the first thing you have to realize is that everything is extraterrestrial. And what that means is pretty much all of the spiritual teachings we have on the planet, all of the religions are extraterrestrial. Some are fairly benign in that you can develop yourself psychically, you know, if you want to raise your kundalini and all that. It would appear as though a blue race gave that to the Indians. You have, as we've already discussed, the Taoism over in China, which is, you know, clearly extraterrestrial. I mean, human beings could not, you know, just sort of come up with that.
See, I didn't know it was clearly extraterrestrial. Could you maybe explain that a bit? I know the Tao Te Ching, it's 84, you know, pages. I really like the Tao Te Ching, but tell me how it's clearly extraterrestrial.
Well, let's do it quid pro quo, okay? Let's do it as a Socratic dialectic. If it's not, okay, so what's the Archangel Gabriel?
I know in Buddhist cosmology, it could be Saka, my favorite deva, the chief deva of the second heaven, in terms of heaven. So I would say Archangel Gabriel is a deva, angel. Is he an alien? I would tend to think more of this ethereal deva type. What do you think?
Well, what's the difference?
Well,
you know, if we go just by, let's just go just by the etymology, by the language, okay? Extra means more than, and terrestrial means earth. So
Yeah,
an
right.
extraterrestrial is any individuated being with identity, personality, language, you know, as opposed to an entity. Like Canada Post is a corporate entity, right? We'll use a Canadian example because we're both Canadian, even though I live in Central America. But when you look at the Archangel Gabriel and the Archangel Michael on the positive side, and you look over at Mammon, Belial, and Moloch on the negative side, according to Milton's Paradise Lost, these are individuated beings with personalities who pop up in the prophetic lineage. So the Archangel Gabriel is alleged to have impregnated Mary. So if it's not an extraterrestrial, explain to me in your divine cosmology, if you want to go with the Deva in the Buddhist cosmology, or if you want to go with the angelic and seraphic in the Abrahamic cosmology, explain to me how this being would have a penis and be able to impregnate a human female.
Okay, in Buddhism, one of my monk teachers, Venerable Panabasa, I've done 100 videos with, he said the Buddhist word deva, D-E-V-A, just means anything above us. This, you know, ordinarily we think of angels, but it could be aliens, physical extraterrestrial aliens. He says deva includes any of that stuff. And the Buddha refused to refer to Deva. The Buddha said that humans came from devas, flat out. That's the Buddhist view. We do not believe in evolution. Flat out, the Buddha stated we descended from devas. That's the orthodox view. All Buddhists basically accept that. So I guess it doesn't make too much difference. But the Buddha is saying that a lot of these angelic devas are shapeshifters. They can take on human form, so they could in fact have a penis. Maybe they could impregnate a human female as a shape-shifting deva and then go back, or they could just be a physical alien. And I'm trying to pin down Buddhist monks, and I just can't get many straight answers. Most of them don't want to talk about it, right? Because it's controversial.
Well, Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that basically it's all extraterrestrial, and you're dealing not only so it's not just that an angel is an extraterrestrial according to the language, but angel comes from the angels are a race of beings, the angelic race, right? We are the human race, they are the angelic race. And once you get through all the wordplay and you reconcile, mythology and the literal world, there's really no other conclusion other than they were extraterrestrial, right? Like most of these teachings. And I
Yeah.
noticed that, I mean, this topic's everywhere now, Brian. All of a sudden it's come into harvest like an apple orchard, right? You've got um, Sadhguru over in India on his YouTube channel and running his Institute for the Study of Human Awareness, the Isha Foundation, all over the world based on yogic principles. And he's going and doing all these talks now, and people are asking him about extraterrestrials,
So
and he's
what does
saying,
he
yeah,
say? What does he say about extraterrestrials?
yeah,
I've seen him.
he's saying yes, Shiva was probably an extraterrestrial.
Good on him.
Yeah. So that now what we're going through now is the realization that extraterrestrials have always been here. And they've always been running things. And the extraterrestrials that are with us now, in my opinion, are quite negative. And they've attached themselves to the human race as a kind of farm, if you will. And we produce a lot of things for what I would call an alliance of negative extraterrestrials. We produce psychic energy for them. Um, the word people throw around a lot now is loosh. Not many people know where that word comes from. It actually comes from a book called Journeys Out of the Body by Robert C. Monroe, published in first printing was in the
1971.
50s.
Okay, I had another shiver up
Was
my
it
spine.
71?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
like
okay.
that was like my first spiritual book when I was 15. And I had astral experiences when I was 16 because of that book. That was a big book in my life. Robert Monroe is a big fan of his. So that's another big click with you.
Yeah.
What does that word loosh mean? What does it mean?
Well, it's an energy we give off on the astral plane. The astral is the sensory world, right? So it's a very negative sort of fear-based energy that's given off when we're in a survival state, and it manifests as a psychic energy, and they can gather it up and they can store it and they can eat it and they can use it for various different things. Human intentional energy is a very sought after commodity amongst certain races. Um,
Yeah,
and then
you
you
can
get
talk more
into,
about that. That makes sense. I don't know much about it, so you can expand upon that if you.
well, I believe there's something very special about the human race. I
Oh,
believe
thank you, Bruce. I do my best. I'm a mere human being like yourself.
uh, I believe there's something very special about the human race, that we were created by a number of other races to try and answer some questions that they couldn't answer. And I believe that we've answered those questions, and they're afraid of the answers because it places us in a dominant position in the universe. And so I think that we're being
Wow.
deliberately held back. You
Wow, that's
know,
a profound statement you make. I'm just thinking, being a Buddhist, the Buddhist worldview, the Buddha is saying the highest being in the universe is a fully enlightened arhat, not just a Buddha, but thousands of fully enlightened. So if a human being achieves full and complete enlightenment, there's no alien higher than that. You've made it as high as it goes. So yeah, I agree. Human beings get as high as you can possibly get in terms of enlightenment.
hmm and human beings have access to the spiritual realms, and a lot of these ETs, they're just in the psychic realms. Now, the psychic realms are, I guess we would call them the astral, the causal, and the mental. Now, these are very powerful realms, and they're much bigger than the physical world. So if you have causal consciousness, I mean, you can move all through the time track and all kinds of stuff, right? And so there's that. But it seems as though they're trying to pin us down here somehow, Brian, because I think that when we raise our consciousness collectively as a species, if that ever happens, and I don't know if it can happen, but if it were to happen, I think that the food supply for a lot of these entities would go away, right?
Do they
So
want a negative energy?
I think they need it.
They
I,
eat it to eat
I,
it.
no, I think they need it.
They need it and they eat it and they need it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a food supply, right? Because you don't get out from under the law of economy until you get into the spiritual realms. Like even after you die, if you're on the astral plane, there's an energetic construct there. The astral body is not immortal. The astral bodies live about 1,000 to 3,000 years. Right? I see you nodding there. The camera's very small on my cell phone.
Yeah, see, the audience can't see me nodding, right? Because Zoom goes back and forth. Skype is a split screen. But I don't know. Like from a Buddhist view, there's rebirth. You could be in an astral plane for 1,000, 3,000. I totally agree with that. Like a Dave or a ghost or whatever. But at some point, you would change form and take rebirth. It wouldn't just come to an end, right?
I've probably been most influenced by the teachings of Kabir in northern India, which correlates with the Sikh path as well. I find that I gravitated to that very, very young, like in my late
What's
teens.
Kabir then? What's that?
Well, that's a whole other video interview. I mean, Kabir is the most important spiritual figure to come to the planet in quite some time.
But is this a Sikh leader, you mean?
No.
Oh.
The Sikh religion didn't exist when Kabir came.
What century was this Kabir, and where did he live? Is he Indian?
Yeah, he was in northern India in Punjab, and he was about 500 years ago, I believe about 1455. He wrote an epic poem called the Anurag Sagar, which translates to the Ocean of Love. And he wrote a lot of other poems. He was the teacher to both the Hindus and the Muslims, because as you get up into northern India, that's where you get to the border with Pakistan, right? All that Gandhi stuff happened in the north. The south down around, Goa and, New Delhi is in the province of Punjab, but that is largely a Hindu city. The Sikhs are more north toward the Pakistan border at Amritsar.
But
there was a bit of a
teacher, did he have a connection to Sikhism?
No, just like Christ didn't have a connection to Christianity.
So was he the founder of Sikhism? Was he the root guru?
Well, he profoundly influenced it.
Oh.
He profoundly influenced it. So, and Kabir preached a phenomenological doctrine. He produced a doctrine of consciousness transformation. It's very interesting. I highly recommend you look into it. You'll enjoy it as a Buddhist. So that influenced me quite a bit. And it also says the same. The reason I bring it up is it says the same thing that you just said, is that a human being can attain a state of consciousness. It actually goes so far as to say, Brian, that to finally get out of the game and merge back with Source, no matter what you are on the higher psychic planes, even if you're a god, you have to incarnate as a human being to get out of it completely. So there's something about
generally the Buddhist view as well. And I would say there's a number of great gurus from India, not just the Buddha, who attained full and complete enlightenment. So yeah, I go along with that.
The moksha, as the Vedics talk about it. But so there's something very special about being a human being, and maybe that's why we were created by the other races, because they had gotten so stuck that they had to create a new vehicle, something that could circumvent a lot of the problems that they had created in their incarnational vessels. And I think that they divorced themselves a lot from the feeling of life and became very, very mental. Like when you look at these extraterrestrials, um, they seem to, in many instances, to be mental giants, but spiritually, um, not so much. And even I have to be careful what I say here because I don't want to tip over anybody's sacred cow. But I mean, even the Palladians, okay? Now, the Palladians, I believe, are largely responsible for the Abrahamic teachings. So I believe that the Palladians, I believe the Adamic line is a Palladian experiment on this planet. And the Adamic line are the brown people, which are the Arabs, the white people, which are the Northern Europeans, and the red people, which are the natives. That's the Adamic line in the
What do you
modern
mean by
world,
Adamic? What does Adamic mean?
extended from Adam. Yeah. So um, now, when you look at the Adamic line, the whole thing is an ET narrative. Okay. So um, when you look at the way that the prophets interact with the angelic forces, it's very phenomenological, very, very phenomenological, right? Um, what would you know the name of that translator that the Vatican hired, and then they fired him, and he was retranslating all the old Hebrew and Aramaic texts to English. And he came halfway through the task. He says, "I hate to tell you this, but your God's an extraterrestrial race." And
Wow.
this, yeah, I'm sorry. I should. This is just a casual interview. I don't have notes in front of me. I thought we
Well,
were just going to be talking about the books, but we're kind of all over the place
well,
here,
that's cool.
and
It's
it's
our
an
first time we're
interesting.
getting to know each other. But what year did that happen when he's telling the Vatican?
Yeah, it's Mario Battucci, or I could be wrong there. Dolan's done a few shows on his YouTube channel on the guy, I think. But he says, look, here it is in the Aramaic and the Hebrew. The angel appears here, but has to walk in a day and a half to get to this village. So and the question is, well, don't angels fly or just appear? So why is he materializing in the physical world and then walking across a desert and showing up parched? You know? So there's all these questions, and um,
So was he
so
shut down by the Vatican? Like what decade did this
yeah.
happen?
Oh, this is a post 2000. This is about 2008, 2009, maybe
Oh,
later, maybe
oh,
even 2012, 2014. Scott, after the interview, I'll send you his name and everything. You see, I can't tinker with the internet and look for it right now. I have such limited bandwidth that our connection will go to
yeah.
crap.
No point
People,
doing it while you're talking because then the audience is going to be there. No,
yeah,
we do it
people
later.
at home
We can put
listening.
a link underneath the video. We can just put the name under the video, or you
Yeah,
can just email it to me and add it to the description.
yeah, and just for your viewers so they understand, I live way up in the mountains in the rainforest. I get my internet through a SIM card that goes into a YY modem, and then the modem broadcasts the Wi-Fi, but I basically get all my internet off a telephone SIM card, right?
Well, God
So
bless the
it's
internet that we can have this conversation in Vancouver, Canada, Costa Rica. Isn't this wonderful, eh? It costs nothing.
yeah,
Well, for me, it costs nothing, except I have
yeah.
my high-speed fiber optic cable. That's about $100 a month.
Yeah, so I live in a UNESCO heritage site, and United Nations Environmental Scientific Cultural Organization. And
Oh, I'm
behind
sorry
me
to hear
here,
that, UNESCO. Sorry to hear that.
well, it means there will never be any development here. I couldn't be happier. Um,
Oh,
so behind me here is probably the most biodiverse 1,000 square kilometers on the planet. more so than the Brazilian rainforest or anything. It's absolutely just a celebration of life back there in the rainforest. Um, so anyways, yeah, so it's an extraterrestrial narrative, okay? So now I'm going to jump to the second book. So Stardust Ranch was like an introduction for me as a writer, and for readers. John and I wrote it as an introduction to exopolitics for people who weren't that well versed. You could give Stardust Ranch to your mother or your grandmother and say, here, read this, let me know what you'd think. And they'd go, well, this is really interesting. I never thought of this stuff before. It's not the deep dive stuff that Rich Dolan does and other researchers who are writing for a very niche market that is already fully baptized in the world of ufology and exopolitics, right? This is like the book you would give your grandmother if you were, 30 years old, and say, here, grandma, read this. It's about UFOs and a guy living on a ranch with portals in Arizona. It also examines the portal phenomenon quite a bit, which explains how we get here, and how things, well, we look at the fossil record and they're telling us there's this thing called evolution, the origin of the species, according to Charles Darwin, and yet we're finding, skeletons of 14-foot human beings, giants all over the world.
That's
How does
correct.
that fit in?
There's
How does
thousands of
that
them
fit?
in the United States, like thousands of those skeletons from the 1800s discovered, and the Smithsonian hid them. You know all about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, the entire reality of what's going on down here is being hid from us. And so,
So, but do
um,
you think this whole human evolution thing? I'm not sure about Darwin, but I think the the globalists said, yeah, this is that. We're going to sell evolution to these people because we know it's false. It's not. It'll attack God, right? We'll say you're just a monkey,
well,
and this is a plot, a conspiracy, and that it's not true. Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry, could you synthesize that a bit better as a question?
That human evolution from apes is a deliberate lie from the 1800s that they knew was a lie, and the globalists deliberately
Yeah.
made this our science and our gospel, knowing it was a lie from day one.
Well, the secret societies who, through their rituals, have had contact with extraterrestrials for centuries and millennia. And by the way, the relationship between magic, sex, and specifically blood magic and extraterrestrials is really the taboo topic in the exopolitics world. But it's huge. You want to know where all these children are disappearing? You want to know why pedophilia is not a sexual act, it's an occult act. So it's not a sexual preference, it's an occult act. Just like, drawing a pentagram in your basement floor and working an old ritual in sequence to summon a demon. It's an occult act, pedophilia. It's not a sexual act. It may be a form of sexual trauma in second and third generation pedophilia, and those are the people who were abused as children. But at the level of inception, which a lot of it comes from the secret society, and these secret societies, in my opinion, Brian, were largely informed by the Talmudic Kabbalists. And here we get to the great rift in the Abrahamic teachings, and it's King Solomon and the destruction of the United Kingdom of Israel. And we have to ask ourselves, if it was the Palladians who produced Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, what was Solomon communicating with? Because that is not the teachings of the prophets. That's pure black magic that Solomon got into. Oh, God gave him the power to control the demons, the rabbis say. Really? Okay, so we in the course of this short conversation you and I have already had, we've already concluded that the angels are extraterrestrials. So why, again, I asked you 20 minutes ago. I gave you 2 on the positive, Archangel Michael and Archangel Gabriel, and I gave you 3 on the negative, which is Mammon, Belial, and Moloch. And Moloch is the most literal of the demons now, right? Because Moloch worship is through the roof now. This is where you sacrifice the child. Again, this is an energetic thing, right? But whenever you go up an order of magnitude in consciousness, which is dimensional space, so in this case, the physical to the astral, you can get certain favors from the astral being or entity that you're making an offering to. You know, they can lay things out in your timeline because they can see the future and the past a little bit better than we can down here on the physical. But the astral isn't what I would call a highly elevated state of consciousness. And a lot of the beings and entities that these magicians and secret society people are interacting with, what's happened to them is they've broken their primary relationship with source. So they're not getting energy from the source of life. They're not getting their water from the spring. And so they're a lot like that group of bandits in Akira Kurosawa's brilliant film, The Seven Samurai. They can't leave the village without stealing half the rice because they haven't prepared for winter and they'll die. So they end up locked into this relationship. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying that, say, someone wants to sacrifice a baby to supplicate this entity that'll give them a little leg up in the future to come, right?
Well, it'll give them a leg up in this timeline in their life.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, based on the two books I wrote, you know, Stardust Ranch and then The Light of Darkness, A Warrior's Tale for Our Time. We'll get to that one in a bit. But look, you want to know what really controls the world? It's not extraterrestrials. It's what the extraterrestrials have taught their human familiars. And that's black magic. Okay? It's black magic, Brian. That's what controls the world. Now, this isn't my idea. I mean, the first person to say this out loud in the late 90s was William Cooper in MJ-12 and the Secret Government, his short book before he wrote Behold a Pale Horse. He said when Eisenhower met with the long-nosed Greys, what Eisenhower and the Americans learned is that the aliens had always been here. They'd always been controlling us, and their main tool of control was religion, the occult, witchcraft, and black magic. So there you go. So, and we seem to be living in a period of time now where all of this information is coming out. But Brian, let me say this, okay? And first of all, let me be very clear about this. I don't make a lot of money at these books. My earning potential as a senior technical writer in software or telecommunications is $10,000 to $12,000 a month. So I'm not in this for the money. Somehow, my life tripped over this information. I fulfilled a promise I made to a friend 8 years ago to do a book. It led to a second book, and now I've written 2 books about this stuff. And what I can tell you, based on what I've learned and the people I've spoken to, and when you publish a book, a lot of people reach out to you. You suddenly get a lot of insider information. They said, okay, this guy went out on a limb. Now, some of the people that reach out to you, they're part of the problem, and they're trying to disinform you a little bit or misdirect you a little bit. And you have to have
I had
incredible.
A call from someone today who might be on my show. I wonder. I had a call from someone today, coincidentally.
Yeah, a lot of these people are, they're trying to misdirect you. But basically, a lot of this in the modern era, because, you know, when you look at the Hebrew scripture, what is it when you think about it? It is the appropriation of, it's the first form of multiculturalism, because being a diaspora of people, the Jews are going around and getting all this information. They're getting it from Egypt, they're getting it from Babylon, they're getting it from Assyria, and they're like gathering it all in one place, right? And it sort of culminates in King Solomon. And King Solomon is the guy that lost the United Kingdom of Israel. And that's what it used to be called, the UK, just like Britain, the United Kingdom of Israel. And then you had the tribe of Judea that went into the Babylonian captivity. And then you had what we call the Israelites that went into the Assyrian captivity. And when people talk about this subject now, they say, well, it's not really the Jews, it's these Ashkenazis, these Khazarians, or this or that. No, It's the Jews. Let's stop making excuses for this.
It's the
Through the
Jews. It's the Jews. A friend of mine made a website called "It's the Jews." I know that. You know that. Let's talk about it.
Okay, so let's talk about it, how it pertains to exopolitics and ufology, okay? Because there's a lot of crypto Jews in this space. One of the biggest lies being told now, and it comes out in William Tompkins' Selected by Extraterrestrials. It comes out in the nonsensical paid-for work of Len Kasten. These are two writers. And they're pushing this idea that Hitler made an alliance with the Nazis. What sense does that?
Well, what do you
Sorry,
mean? Hitler
sorry.
alliance with
Yeah,
who?
yeah, yeah. I realize the what I just said there. Hitler made an alliance with the Nazis. Made an alliance with the reptilians. Okay. Now, if you know your ET lore, and if you know which ET races are genetically associated with which human races, that's completely preposterous.
I know, and Linda Moulton Howe says that, and it bugs me because the Germans were the good guys, so
Well,
I
it's not
assume they're
just.
White
It's
Nordics.
not just. It's well. This is when the big lie starts. Is in World War II. So it's not just Linda Moulton Howe. Okay. I mean, once you get into this, it's epidemic. I mean, Carrie Cassidy at Project Camelot is Jewish. And look, I'm not trying to out people, and I'm saying that there are certain agendas. Simon Parkes, the exopolitics and psychic commentator out of the UK, is Jewish. Len Kastner, the main writer that links the reptilians and the Nazis, is Jewish. Stephen Greer, the leader of the Disclosure Project in Washington, is Jewish.
Yeah, Stephen Greer, is he an Ashkenazi Jew? That's what I read.
I don't know.
But he's
Look,
Jewish. He's a Baha'i
this is
faith, which is a good cover your Baha'i, but he's Jewish.
his wife's Orthodox, okay? This is what I'm trying to tell people. Is it,
So
his
wife is not a Baha'i, she's an Orthodox Jew? Stephen Greer?
yeah, I believe that to be the case. Don't quote me on that though. Do a little research, and if
Okay,
I'm wrong,
thanks.
put it in the text under the interview.
But
Now
yeah,
look,
I've had the same feeling with Stephen Greer. I even suspect that he personally could be a reptilian in human form. That's why he says all the aliens are peaceful. All the aliens, it's these military abductions that are violent. Because he's saying that because he knows the reptilians are violent, and he could be one of them.
well, look. I mean, all you got to know about Stephen Greer is it's alien disclosure brought to you by the same people who brought you 9/11. Are you happy with the official narrative on 9/11? If you're happy with that, you should be happy with Stephen Greer's ET disclosures,
Interesting.
right?
His big disclosure meeting was what, 2 days before 9/11 on September the
Now
9th, 2001.
here's the thing I need to say, okay? This is extremely important because I don't want to incite anti-Semitism. And anti-Semitism is real. There are people by religious proclivity and history and family custom who don't like Jews just because the New Testament says that they were instrumental in the death of Christ, which is a lie. In my world reality, Christ was never crucified. Okay, that's also and Christ, according to the book I did with Robert Wiegand, who spent several months out in Switzerland with Billy Meyer and that crew. Christ was the product of not an archangel, but a Palladian Ishwish, which is a Palladian holy man, is what inseminated Mary. So Christ was an alien-human hybrid. So the story gets more and more complicated, and I don't want to create any animosity towards Jewish people because the Torah is in fact a Palladian doctrine. It's not until this very power-based black magic through King Solomon comes in that we get this split. And
You mean the Talmud, which is the real religion more so than the Torah.
well, the Talmuds began in captivity, right? So you got the Babylonian Talmud, and then you've got something else that came out of Assyria.
Yeah, there's
And
a Palestinian Talmud, but the Babylonian Talmud is boss. It was like from 536 BC to 500 AD. Then they wrote it down, 7,000 pages, but that is the highest authority in Judaism today.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, what that means is that Judaica has become a postmodern religion. They'd rather read criticism on the literature than the literature itself. They'd rather read the rabbi's commentary than actually make an effort to understand the Torah, because the Torah is a gift. If you're Jewish and you can read that in its original language, that's a tremendous spiritual gift. That's equivalent to the Taoism we spoke about
You're
earlier.
talking about the
Maybe
Old Testament of the Christian Bible, right?
I'm talking about the Torah.
Isn't that the Old Testament of the Christian Bible?
Well, the Old Testament of the Christian Bible is basically when the Romans took over the tax and indulgences racket from the Sadducees and the Pharisees. You see, I have to finish my narrative here because it's even-handedly offensive. I don't want to just stay at the Jews, because what happens after that is the Romans come in, okay? And they further pervert the teachings. They don't tell the truth about Christ. They perpetuate this, nonsensical stigma about the Jews, although they are doing the black magic. That can't be denied. When you look at the record of expulsions from over 100, 112 expulsions from European
109
countries.
is the number often bandied about, but then there's cities, states, and countries of cities. It could be a lot more than that, but it's around
Well,
there.
and so and the reasons are generally the same, right? It's usury, perversion, and missing Gentile boys around Passover. And if the bodies are found, they're kind of cryptically and disturbingly bled out, like ritually. So, anyways, my point in all of this, Brian, is that in my estimation and the research I did writing The Light of Darkness, A Warrior's Tale for Our Time, and what I learned about extraterrestrials writing Stardust Ranch and meeting John Edmonds, is that, we have this situation in the world now where this very toxic knowledge came in, this magic, right? And it's literally running the world now. It's been running the world for a long time, and it's no longer just a Jewish thing, okay? So the Freemasons, that's basically Kabbalah for the Goyim, okay? Freemasonry is Judaica for the Goyim. It gets crazy, and the plan that leads us to the world we live in today begins in England in the 1600s, and it begins with a bunch of Sabbatean Jews from Amsterdam. Who
I think in the
who back
1690s, they moved base from Amsterdam to London, right? With the Rothschilds just got going around that decade.
Yeah, and you know why they moved base, right? Because they backed Cromwell in the war against the Stuart family, and they brought the William of Orange in from Amsterdam, and they got the Bank of England charter in 1684. That's been a Jewish enterprise since 1684. That inner city in London, the London city, back in the day in the 1700s, they didn't call that London City the way we call it today. They called that the Jewish Quarter. And that's, if you look at
I
London
didn't know
today,
that.
yeah,
Oh,
if you look at it, wow, you just think about this interview and how people are going to take it when they watch it,
well,
right?
I'm learning
And
a lot from you, Bruce. I'm very impressed. You're one of my best guests. I'm glad to discover you. Where were you 3 years ago? You should have called me 3 years ago.
well, I hadn't done all this research, but the point is, look, a good living, I just got a message there. A good living Jew who lives by the Torah is what I would call a righteous person and a friend and brother of mine in the human experience. And it's it just is what it is, and it's led us to this point. And this is why, because these secret societies and their magic and their blood rituals, they got in early at the formation of the modern world 350 years ago, and that's why they control everything now. And then you could even make the case that they're just a face for people who do a little bit of digging, like myself and yourself, Brian. They're just a face for something even deeper behind that. Then you get into these 13 families of Rome and all of this sort of stuff. But for all of you who are going to run away with very anti-Semitic feelings right now, in the modern world, the Jews, even though visibly they're the money masters, but they're working under the Jesuits. In my opinion, the Jesuits are running everything. They're extremely powerful, right?
See, my understanding was that the Jesuits, at some point at the beginning, were created by the Jews or infiltrated by the Jews, and the Jews control the Jesuits. I look at the other way around. I think Jesuits, the Pope, and the whole Catholic Church is just another arm of Jewish power. That's how I've understood it for years.
Well, the founder of the Jesuit order, Saint Ignatius de Loyola, was a crypto Jew, right?
So does that indicate right there that it's just another Jewish operation? The Jesuits are not above the Jews are above the Jesuits.
The thing is, we continue to think about it religiously, and it doesn't become religious anymore. It becomes about numbers and power. So the Vatican has about 1.5 billion people under it. Think of it from the perspective of intentional energy. So you understand, I mean, blood magic is a low form of magic. Intentional energy is what you really want to really get some high order, high magic going. And intentional energy, if you convince 100 people to believe something and harness that intent, that's water to wine stuff. The intentional energy of the human consciousness in one extremely evolved human being is extremely powerful. It's also extremely powerful in large groups of people working in concert. So there's only 20 million Jews on the planet. There's 1.5 billion Catholics. Who has the power now? So let me give you an example of what intentional energy is, okay? Where do you stand with the Holocaust? I'm going to let you go first before I blurt out all this crazy stuff, because I don't want to be constantly charging into this stuff. Where do you stand with the Holocaust?
Well, where I stand with the Holocaust is the international Jewish powers, who they Holocausted the Germans. They firebombed about 1 million to death. They killed millions of Germans after the war. So in order to
8 million.
In order to distract the world from the Jewish killing of the Germans, they turn it around. They project their faults on their victim, and it's a hoax.
Okay, there you go. So I just wanted you to give me a simple answer. I absolutely agree. I did my own research on this, a lot of different sources. I tried to find the original documentation. I went back and I found all of the newspaper stories that were talking about the 6 million Jewish souls that were in peril, going back to right to 1907. That's a magical number, by the way, 6 million Jews. And so why do they do it? Why are we still seeing Holocaust and poor Jew nonsense and bad Nazi nonsense? We're still seeing it on HBO, Showtime, in the movies, everywhere. Because it's an example of intentional energy harvesting. In this particular instance, we call that sympathy magic, Brian. Right? It's sympathy magic. So they're out there harvesting all of these. Remember, it's not just the things on the other side that use the intentional energy of humans, the vast emotional energy we have, because we're one of the more probably the most feeling species in the universe, right? So this energy is used here by human beings as well. It's not just fed to their dogs on the other side. So the Holocaust.
You mean billions of reparations, dollars from Germany to Israel to rabbis and Jews? That's what you're saying. Money.
And the money as well. So, but mainly it's the harvesting of intentional energy, and this is what allows them to, mass murder Palestinians and other Arab neighbors for the Greater Israel Project. Oh, the poor Jews, they went through a Holocaust 75 years ago. Forget about Mogadishu. Forget about, shake hands with the devil, with the general from Canada who watched the genocides. And there are no other genocides. There are no other Holocausts. It's all Jewish 24/7. There's only 20 million of them on the planet. There's like just under 8 billion people on this planet right now. And we're still milking this Holocaust bullshit. I mean,
yes.
I lose. I lose my patience with it, Brian, because it's 2020 and we need to outgrow this. And as clearly and articulate as I'm speaking to you tonight, I want to assure you, I have many Jewish friends, and I speak this way to them, and they see it too. They're sick of the bullshit too, you know. So when we say, you know, the Jews, it's like, you know, is every Catholic who truly believes is every Catholic who truly believes that in the power of Christ, which I think is a worthwhile spiritual endeavor. I believe that, you know, people who study the Gospels, that's a powerful sutra. If we want to look at it from the Eastern perspective, you and I look at things, the Gospels are a very powerful sutra. Would you agree, Brian? Okay, so
Yeah,
but
I
are
would
they
agree
all?
with that. I would agree. I support
Are they
Christianity.
are is every Catholic raping children like the cardinals and the bishops? No. Okay? And it's the same thing with Judaica. They're being screwed over by their Sanhedrin, and we're all being used is the point. Okay? We're all being used by these priests, these rabbis, and these imams. We're all being used, okay? So let's circle the whole conversation back over to extraterrestrials. What do extraterrestrials like to do? Well, they control the capstone. And the capstone in human consciousness for people who don't learn to meditate and liberate their consciousness, who follow belief systems, and in this case, Abrahamic belief systems, the capstones are the priestcraft. So that's all you have to corrupt. And not even all of them, just the top ones. You'd be amazing. You'd be amazed, Brian, how few people you have to corrupt and win over to control 100 million people. It's really not
Yeah,
that
it's
complicated. And they've
pretty
been doing
easy to
it.
control people, isn't it? It's kind of easy to control people.
Yeah. So, you know, and this is why they want to take away all the land and everything through the birth certificate system. And this is why I came back to land and I grow my own food and I keep my own cattle and my own chicken and I control my entire food and water supply on this mountain, you know. And when you have a home that you own and you have fertile land that produces food for you, you know, bananas, coconuts, platans, potatoes, and all your food is around you. It's a tremendous sense of liberation. Now, I was born in Ottawa, Canada. I moved to Toronto when I was 19 and lived there till I was about 48. And I came over here and did this project, and I'm 54 now.
But hey,
And so
Bruce, I might have to bail Canada. If the big one comes, I'll be talking to you after this. I might have to bail Canada.
Hey, Brian, I don't mean to dishearten you, but my arc is full, man. You know how many people want to come over here now?
Yeah, I know. I got a few
It's
plan
pretty.
Bs up my sleeve. Yeah, it's okay. It's
Well,
okay.
have you ever looked at the population statistics on Deagle.com?
Not on Deagle.com, no.
Well, they're predicting massive population decreases in North America. Something very bad is coming to North America.
Oh yeah,
By
I've seen those kind of predictions. Yeah, that's why I've
yeah,
been talking about that since 2016.
yeah, by the pricking of their thumbs, something wicked your way comes. And that, you know, so and the money system, the Christians only understand it to a limited astral degree. You can go another level above that and look at it causally as a Buddhist. It is a karma transference system. That's how they get away with all this crap. The money system is a karma transference system. Ergo, if you want to look at it from the Abrahamic perspective, it's a scapegoating system. You put all your sins into the goat, you run the goat into the woods, and all the sins have left the tribe, right?
What do you mean a karmic transference system? Like I'm thinking of the Buddhist law of karma. It's about your intentional actions, your deeds. It's not how much money you have. Do you mean literally the Buddhist law of karma? You're talking about sort of a metaphorical, a satirical idea.
No, I mean, it's literally a karma transference system. This is a whole other interview. This is a 2-hour interview just on its own, the magical nature of money and the Babylonian money system. And it's
Okay, yeah,
interesting
so
how,
we can put that aside for another video. You're saying carry on.
yeah,
We can do
who's
that
the
another
most
time. Okay.
who's the most vocal and prominent ET spokesperson in Canada? It's still Paul Hellyer, right? The ex-Minister of Finance and Defense.
Yeah, I've met
I
him in person. We email from time to time. I know him.
Well, I grew up in Ottawa. I was born in 1966.
Oh, so
I
you met
remember
him.
when he used to go door to door and hand out comic books promoting the Action Party of Canada, talking about funny money in the 80s before any. So why does this topic of ETs and the banking system always go together, even in Paul
Yeah,
Hellyer?
I've talked to him about that. Yes.
Okay. Can we leave it there for tonight and then do another one another time?
Yes, Bruce, this has been very good. Yeah, we did, gosh, I must have done an hour and a half. The time flew. I really appreciate you. And after this, we'll discuss our next meeting. It's great having you on the Brian Roos Show. And this is a video I'll probably be watching more than once or twice. And looking forward to more. Thank you kindly. And do you have a
Well, thank
website for the audience?
No, but don't forget to read my books, Stardust Ranch, The Incredible True Story, and Macdonald is Macdonald, and The Light of Darkness, A Warrior's Tale for Our Time, which is Bruce Macdonald and Robert Wiegand, and the other one is Bruce Macdonald and John Edmonds. I call it deposition literature. I basically tell everybody somebody else's story like I'm a court clerk deposing them, but I use my literary ability to make it exciting, I guess, and readable. But
Wow.
yeah.
Also, I want to
When
invite
is
you.
this? Can you send me the link to this first interview once it goes up?
Oh, absolutely, sure. So as soon as it goes up, yeah. Also, I want to invite you. I have writers for my 3 websites, and also the audience. If people want to write for my website, you can. Also for BitChute, like, subscribe, and also have a playlist. This will be on my UFO playlist. So on the top left of BitChute, where it says Brian Roos, underneath that says The Brian Roos Show. Click on that. Scroll down. Many playlists there. So thanks for being on the
Yeah.
show, Bruce. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. Bye-bye.